Hello and welcome along to the Panto podcast. This week my guest is writer, director and seasoned pantomime dame, Paul Tate. In this episode he tells me how he likes wordplay, the difficulty with directing, and getting jobs because he was pretty. Well, in his younger years anyway. Sorry, Paul. This is a very emotional episode, and I'd like to thank Paul for his openness and his honesty to me, and to you, our listeners. So please, sit back, relax, and enjoy the latest Panto podcast.
My guest for today's Panto podcast is the wonderful Paul Tate. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Finally, after all this time.
I know, you've done well to get me because I'm quite a private person, so...
The elusive, Paul Tate.
Still waters run deep.
So, was your family a theatrical
No,
family?
none of them. My great-grand, she used to sing in the church choir, and so did I, when I was younger. But absolutely nobody, as far as I know, going back through the ancestry that I've found, none of them, not one of them in the business. I think I got the interest from my gran. She used to take me to shows when I was little, to Panto, to go and see children's shows. She was always interested in theatre, but nobody in the business that I know of.
And how did it happen with you?
What, coming into the business?
Coming into the business. I mean, when did you first sort of shine?
I used to always do the school shows. And the first school show that I ever did, I was 10, and I played the ugly sister in Cinderella at my junior school. And I always remember everybody got changed in the same classroom in those days. There was none of this separation of boys and girls. We all got changed into costume. And I remember one teacher shouting across the room at me because I'd put my bra on upside down. Well, that was the first time I'd ever wore a bra, so I didn't know. I was a 10-year-old lad, But that's the first sort of major show that I did at school. And then when I went to comprehensive, they did a major musical every year, so I used to always do their shows. I also played the violin, so did the concerts there as well. But the way that I actually came into the business was that one of the girls that was in one of the school shows with me got a summer season job. So I went to see her doing summer season and met the producer afterwards. And the producer said, I've got one more part to cast in the Panto. Do you fancy doing an audition? I said, yeah, just let me know the details and I'll come along and do an audition for you. He said, no, you can do it here and now. So he gave me the script to have a look at. I read for the part and I got the part, which then I'd be probably about 20, something like that. And I got the part of the genie of the lamp in Aladdin. Totally miscast. I would never cast me as the genie of the lamp in a million years, but I think the producer fancied me. I was young, thin and pretty, and there I was, and he might have been desperate to cast it, I don't know, but this was in the summer, so it wasn't that too close to Panto, but he gave me the part there and then. And that was my first pro Panto in 1984, and I just used to stand in the wings and watch all the old pros doing their act, and because in those days you get the comic coming on and doing 25 minutes of their act before the story started. Nowadays it's quite immediate, the scripts and things like that, but I just used to stand in the wings and absorb everything because these were people that I'd seen on TV. It was a big thing for this little lad from a Lincolnshire village to suddenly be thrown into the world of show business, having had I trained as like a teacher, drama teacher, but I didn't train as a performer. It was just what I'd learnt from doing all the shows. So I was thrown into the business and I was so green when I first started, so green into this big wide world of show business, seeing all these stars, and I was just in awe of everything, the whole thing. And then a couple of years after that I started doing Ugly Sister, then Dame, and carried on ever since.
Who was in that first Panto then?
I don't know if you remember Linda Lee Lewis. She was one of the sort of on one of the quiz shows. I think it was it Sale of the Century? I'm not quite sure. I mean, it's a long time ago now. But Johnny Moore was the comic.
Yeah.
Tommy Trafford and Ronnie Parnell, which were the producers, and they were both in the show as well. They're old pros, you know. Mary Ashton, who was one of the roly-polies, was the choreographer. And I went for Christmas at Tommy's one time, and they were there with Mighty Atom and things like that. So, it was just like, it was wonderful. And it was in Southport, so it was at the seaside, and I love doing Panto by the seaside. Just blows the cobwebs away, so it's brilliant. But what a great experience for me to start off with old pros. You know, it was wonderful to watch them.
And then what was your kind of plans after that?
I just wanted to work. You know, I never ever wanted to be a star, never wanted to be known, you know, for basically doing my job. I just wanted to do it because I loved it. Nowadays, you have, you know, people want to be stars, they want to be celebrities. A lot of people in the business, a lot of my friends, they just want to work. And as long as you're getting a weekly wage, cover all your bills, that's all you can ask for. So, you know, I'm very happy that I'm still in the business that I chose to do. And whatever comes along, I'm open to anything. You know, I act, I sing, I direct, I've done musicals, I've done plays, you know, West End national tours, you know, wonderful things to have done. But you never know what's around the corner. I could get a call from my agent tomorrow saying, you know, EastEnders wants to see you, Coronation Street wants to see you. You just never know what's around the corner.
Do you like that excitement? Because it must be quite difficult as well when the phone doesn't ring.
Yeah, I do like the excitement of when I get an audition. You know, obviously with the past couple of years, it's been Zoom auditions and things like that, so not in person. But I love it when I get an email from my agent saying so and so wants to see you. I tend not to have to audition for Panto nowadays because most sort of producers in the Panto world know me. But yeah, I love everything about the business. I love touring, seeing all the different theatres, the different places. When I first started, the first major tour that I did was Joseph, and played one of the brothers, and seeing all those beautiful theatres, you know, all the Frank Matcham theatres, beautiful venues. That was exciting, and going to places that I'd never been to or would never go to if I wasn't on tour. And I still like touring to this day. Yes, it is a bit of a bind being, you know, going away from home and living out of a suitcase and things like that. But I just love seeing all the different venues and playing them and all the different towns.
Do you like the camaraderie as well when you're on tour?
I do, yeah. It's not the same business that I came into, I must admit. Because I've been in the business a long time, I'm a little bit jaded, to the effect that, you know, I've seen it, I've done it, I've got the t-shirt sort of thing. But you can get one job and it brings it all fresh again. It all depends on what the job is and who you're working with. Nowadays, I tend to know everybody, you know, in the business, so I'll know most of the cast when I get a new job. But all the youngsters are coming up now and I don't know any of them. So, and you'll find that I'll go and see shows in town, and the characters who are supposed to be my age, they'll be played by a 30-year-old aging up. So as I'm getting older, it's getting slightly difficult to get in there because producers are casting younger people for my age range.
That must be kind of worrying though sometimes. Or do you feel like you've got to up your game?
Oddly enough, I saw David Allen Burt the other day, David Robbins, who's doing a new wig for me for Panto. And I said to him, I was talking about the business and things like that, and even with Panto, because of the younger ones that are coming along, I think a lot of the older generation are thinking we're going to have to up our game. You know, the ones that are not too established, you know, the ones that are very well-known dames, but the sort of jobbing actors thinking, you know, we're going to have to up our game if we want to keep doing it, because it's getting harder. The older I get, you know, 10 costume changes per show is hard. You know, you never stop when you're doing dame. You're always straight off into the wings, putting a costume on and straight back on. You never have any time to settle before you go on.
Where did your dame come from then? And also, how did it begin, the actual dame journey?
Stan Stennett, I was doing a tour, and the agent who I was with then got me a tour of A Christmas Carol, and he knew Stan Stennett, and Stan was looking for an ugly sister, And so the agent said, Stan's looking for an ugly sister, do you fancy doing it? I said, well, and then I was like in my early 20s, and I thought, am I not too young? Because then, in those days, most dames and ugly sisters were in their 40s, 50s. You know, it was that sort of thing. Nowadays, you've got dames coming along and they're in their early 20s. So I said, do you not think I'm too young? He went, no, Stan wants to see you. So I saw him, got the job, and that started as my ugly sister. And I thought, oh, maybe I should look at playing dame. So I auditioned for dame, got it, and sort of been doing ugly sister and dame ever since. Occasionally I've done like the Baron or the Emperor type parts, you know, which are lovely because you have like 2 costume changes for the whole show. So that's a walk in the park. But yeah, that's how my dame thing started. And I love it. I just love the whole thing about a man in a frock. When I was young, I used to watch all the Stanley Baxter shows and the Dick Emery shows. And I just used to love seeing them dressed as women. Nobody ever spoke about why they were dressed as women. You just used to watch it and it was funny. You know, the whole family used to watch it together. So I loved Stanley Baxter, loved Dick Emery. Harry Worth, another comedian that I absolutely loved. Stupid, but I loved him. As a kid, I found him very funny. Nowadays, I probably wouldn't, you know, but then those sort of people, old pros like that grew up on the variety circuit, I just adored, absolutely adored. And I think that's what made me want to sort of try and do it. I didn't know then whether I could do it. It was trial and error at the beginning. I just learnt from watching the old pros and still doing it today, thankfully.
The look then of your dame and the mannerisms, where did they come from?
The mannerisms, I think I adored my nana. Absolutely adored my nana. She cooked the best chips, and I love chips to this day. But I adored my nana, and I think because I had a great friendship with my nana, she was one of those, you know, typical northern battle axe women, you know, like the old women you used to watch in Coronation Street. She was that, and I absolutely adored her. So I think I got some of my mannerisms from her. I certainly based my first few dames on her. I like a dame to be a man in a frock, but I also like them to be warm, as if you could just go and give them a big hug, you know. So yeah, definitely from my nana.
And the actual look itself, how long did that take to sort of, till you were happy with it?
I've kept the same sort of dame makeup for years, and I think that again was just trial and error, just sort of doing what you thought was right, just from looking at other dames that I saw when I went to see Pantos. Obviously, in those days, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have Google, where you could just Google a dame's makeup, and YouTube and things like that. So it was just on what I noticed when I went to see other dames do it.
And who did you like to go and see?
Just loads of people. When I was young, I just used to go and see all the Pantos, just to sort of absorb all their performances. And then you had the big variety people, because we still had long summer seasons and long Pantos. I used to do summer season when I first started. You'd do like a 26-week summer season, have a month off, do a 12-week Panto, have a month off, and then do summer season again. So you'd really be in constant work. All that's gone now, you know. I mean, seaside places, thankfully, people still like to go to, but they don't go for a week anymore. They just go for the day. So you haven't got that audience that will go and see a different show a night. So many theatres gone. I remember when I did summer season in Scarborough, Ken Dodd was at the Opera House and we all went to see him. Show started at 8 and he came down about midnight, something like that. But that was at the Opera House. That's gone. The Futurist has now gone. All, you know, big, massive theatres that had the big summer seasons. That's what I miss. All the shows like Seaside Special, all those sort of shows where you could actually be entertained watching all these old pros. That was my main thing that I got inspiration from, is watching the older performers.
What was it you were doing then in these
Well, because
shows?
As I said earlier, I was young, thin and pretty. I was never what I would call a dancer, but I could move. And because I was young, thin and pretty, I used to get a lot of jobs. And in those days, there weren't that many boy dancers around. There really weren't. You'd go to an audition and there'd be like 300 girls in the room and probably about 5 boys. And so I tended to get jobs because they needed 2 boys in that show, and those were the 2 boys that they chose, and I was one of them. So that's how I got a lot of my work in the early days. Yeah. Obviously now I'm old, fat and ugly, so...
Oh, don't say that. But one of the things I'm getting from you is kind of this kind of release you get from being on stage.
I do, and like obviously with the past couple of years because of COVID, I've not had that release. The same as many people, you know. If you're in a creative business and you can't be creative, it's really stunting. And obviously I write Panto scripts as well, and I've been doing a couple of those. But it's been really hard to keep the motivation and be creative, because you haven't got an end goal, because nobody knows when this is going to end. It's the not knowing, and you know, I don't know whether I'll get a job tomorrow. I might get a commercial tomorrow. I might get a national tour, but lots of things are still not happening. Yeah. And that's the horrible thing, is not knowing when this is going to come right again.
How have you kept yourself busy over the lockdown and the horrible times?
I do tend to sort of, I'll do it tomorrow. And I never do. I'm really guilty about that. Yeah, really guilty. And I know I've got deadlines for certain things, but in my head, I just think I can't cope with it today. I'll try tomorrow. And I think that is the thing. It's like, you know, for many, many years, I've suffered with depression and anxiety, and it's been magnified with the past couple of years. And sometimes, you know, especially if you live on your own, and yes, I've got my mum, you know, she's been really helpful, and I wouldn't have been able to support myself without her over the past couple of years. But mentally, if you live on your own, I've got my neighbours, you know, but if you live on your own, you've got nobody to chat to at the end of the day. You've just got your 4 walls. And sometimes I think, I just want to go away somewhere for a couple of days and just get a change of scenery. That's what I've found over the past couple of years. I found it really difficult to deal with, you know, but depression, anxiety runs in the family. I was severely bullied several years ago during a panto, and that's really affected me over the past few months, years. Every so often I'll go into a dark space.
I'm sorry to hear that. Can we talk about that? I mean, obviously not with names and things, but you know,
you can. I might start crying, but
that's okay, mate.
Yeah.
And if it gets at all difficult,
yeah,
tell me and we can edit it out. Or
it's really difficult to talk about because I don't want to play the victim, but it's really affected me.
How does it even begin? What you know, you go into Panto fresh and happy and excited, don't you? And
yeah, it was a horrible time for me. It was when I was producing, and I trusted lots of people. I handed the reins over to other people that I trusted, because I didn't want it to turn into the Paul Tate show. Paul Tate was producing it, Paul Tate was in it, Paul Tate was writing it, Paul Tate used to direct his shows. So I thought, well, let's give a few of the reins away. So I said, I'm not going to direct it, I'll just write it and I'll produce it, and I'll hand the reins over to somebody else. I handed the reins over to somebody that I trusted. I went into a venue on the recommendation of another person that I trusted. Certain people that worked at the venue hammered me into the ground, and I was still having to go in there and do 2 shows a day. Yeah, they destroyed me for many, many years.
I'm sorry to hear that. But the most important thing wasn't you at that time. It was the audience.
Yeah.
Were they happy with your performance at that time, or did you think?
To tell you the truth, I don't know how I got through that run. I really don't. There was one day, it got to the point where I tried to commit suicide. It was that bad.
I'm sorry to hear.
And then the following day, I had to turn into work and face everybody. All the cast and the crew knew what was going on. I had one of the celebs that was in the show was really on my side, and he used to come to meetings with me and try and talk it through, but I was having to go in every single day knowing that this was the end, basically. And ever since that day, I've not produced since. I loved producing. I'm not Lily White. I may well have done things wrong, you know. But one of the main things is that I trusted people, and I'm a very trusting person. But if you do me wrong, you're out of my life completely. And that's my self-preservation mechanism now, is that you do me wrong and you're gone.
No
Simple as that. Yeah. No. I used to always say I've got mug written on my forehead. Because I was such a good-natured soul, people used to take advantage of me, and I don't let that happen anymore. And I know recently, in the Panto world as well, because it affected me so much, it did turn me into a different person, and I don't suffer fools anymore. If there's something going wrong during a Panto run, I will voice my opinion. If I'm being what I perceive as being bullied, or if I am being bullied, I will stand up for myself, because that's the only way that I'll get through it.
Thank you for being honest.
I could be more honest, but obviously I don't want to. That part of my life, although it's still affecting me, that part of my life is gone.
And you can use that as a stepping stone.
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to put the blame on anybody, because I can live with what I did. I can live with my conscience. I don't think the other people involved can, although they probably are, because they did me wrong. That's how I look at it. That's how other people in the cast saw it. I can live with what I did.
The next time then you approach pantomime, obviously there are scars from that.
Yeah.
Had them scars healed?
Do you know what? I don't think the scars will ever heal totally. When I do new pantos, obviously, you know, some of the cast are new, some of the performers I'll know. So that makes it fresh, and it will bring a new light to the thing. But there's always that thing at the back of my mind, is that I'm putting myself into a situation again where I'm not in control.
You're vulnerable.
Yeah. And that's why I've never produced since, is because I don't want to put myself through that again. As a producer, especially with Panto, you're working 24/7 the whole year. You know, lots of performers that haven't directed, haven't produced, they don't understand it from that side. They think a producer just sits in an office and signs checks, you know, whatever, and that sort of thing. And they're, you know, a lot of performers, I've heard them say, oh, producers, they're just pen pushers, blah, blah, blah. It's hard work. If it wasn't hard work, every single person would be producing. And that's why in this country, there aren't many producers. There really aren't that many. You know, thankfully, a lot of the younger ones are coming along now, but it's the old producers, you know, like Paul Elliott, Nick Thomas, Michael Harrison, that are sort of, they've been around for a long time, they're keeping it going. But once they're gone, you know, where's the rest of them coming from? It's a hard thing to do. And I didn't realise that till I did it. When I first directed shows, whether it be a musical, a play, or Panto, I didn't know what it was like as a director. Yes, as a performer, I could see what the director did and how they dealt with things, and that's what I learnt from as well. But until I did it, I didn't know how hard it was. I loved directing. I absolutely loved directing. I get a lot of enjoyment from the creative process and things like that. And I even like painting sets. I also run an amateur group in my old hometown, and I paint the scenery when I'm up there rehearsing with them, because I think I'm rehearsing with them in the evening. I might as well fill my days and do a bit of set painting. So I'm very hands-on like that. I will do lots of things, but I find if I do too much now, then the pressure can start getting to me, and when the pressure and stress gets to me, that's when I start shouting. And I know that's a bad thing in me now, but that's my coping mechanism again. That's me trying to deal with the situation. But I know full well that when I get stressed, I get angry.
And then have you worked away now, sort of a pressure release? Do you have any sort of coping mechanism with that?
I don't. I really don't. I wish I could. I wish there was a hammer inside my head saying, "Don't think before you speak." But when I get stressed, it comes out straight away, because that's me. It's like if you've got two wolves, and one of the wolves that's coming towards you is really going to go for you, and then you've got to try and put it off. You've got to try and stop it. And that's how I feel. That's how, since I was bullied, it really affected me, and I will defend myself now over anything. And I know it's lost me jobs. I know there's some people in the business that will say Paul Tate is the absolute, he's the loveliest person that you could ever meet. I know there's people in the business that will say he's a twat. Can I say that word?
You could say whatever you want.
Yeah,
I know. Use stronger.
I know full well, but they've only seen that side of me because they've done something to me. I treat people how they treat me, and if you're lovely to me, I'll be lovely to you back. But I won't suffer fools anymore. I won't be hammered into a box. I'll really stand my ground now. I never try and hurt anybody, not deliberately, and if I do, I'll be the first to apologise. But I'm my person now, and I've got to survive for me, and that's how I do it. And like I said, I wish something would stop me sometimes from what I say.
Even a right-hand man or right-hand woman to be able to say, right then, get an assistant or something like that, possibly.
Yeah. I mean, if ever I directed again, then it would be nice to have an assistant. Not every producer has that luxury of sort of like saying yes you can sort of thing. But what I find difficult as well in the Panto side of it is, because I'm obviously performing in the show, if I direct it as well, that's so difficult, because you're trying to get the show on in like a week to 10 days. You've got to learn everything. You've got to, learn the script, the dance routines, the songs. You've also got the technical side to deal with as a director. If you're performing as well, the last performer you need to get right is you, because you've got to get everybody else right first. And that's what I find really quite stressful. I do get anxious about that still.
But it's only because you care. That's what you got to remember
exactly,
as well.
Exactly. You are spot on there. Spot on. It is because I care. And, I did a panto a couple of years ago where the cloths didn't meet the wings, or they were really, really like draped oddly. And I thought, is this a professional panto or not? And, and I voiced it to the producer, and the producer said, well, the stage manager thinks it's all right. Well, the cast didn't. The audience noticed it. I had loads of friends come and see the panto, and they saw, and you wouldn't see it in an amateur pantomime, let alone a professional one. And I thought, at the end of the day, it's pride in what you put in front of an audience. And I wasn't the director of that show. I didn't have anything to do with the production. I was just there as a performer. And maybe I shouldn't have voiced my opinions. But when things were going wrong with the show and the cast were looking fools on stage because it looked as if they were wrong, with like sound effects coming in late or things like that, then you have to mention it to the company manager or the stage manager and get it noted down in the show report. Well, things were going down in the show report saying that certain cast members were going wrong when it was the technical side. So things like that, I shouldn't have to say that's wrong because it's not my place, so maybe I shouldn't have said it, but I had pride in the whole production.
As well, you're of an older generation to probably the other people as well.
Yeah.
And you go by standards that I've seen pro productions before where they've got a torn cloth.
Yeah.
And that, I know I'm involved with the business and I see things, but you could not miss a torn cloth.
Yeah.
If that show goes up 10 minutes late with a repaired cloth, so be it.
Exactly.
A bit of Wonder Web or a bit of gaffer
Yeah.
tape, and that's it, and just get through it, and let's get this
Yeah.
done.
I mean, there was no way that even Joe Public would not have noticed what was wrong with the show and things like that. And, I felt really aggrieved that someone that had only done one job in their life before was trusted over what I'd said. And I said, well, ask the rest of the cast. Ask them what they're seeing, ask them what they're hearing. And I felt abandoned. I felt really abandoned. I thought, I've never been big-headed. I don't think I'm the bee's knees in the business, but I've been in the business a long time, and I would have hoped that the producer would have believed me. I felt really aggrieved over that. And I'm not going to name names because it doesn't solve anything, but I'm just getting my point over now that this is how I know sometimes I'm like a bull in a china shop, but that's just my protecting myself now, And I know it's lost me jobs. But there's a reason, and it all stems back to when I was bullied.
And it all comes down to your heart as
Yeah,
well. You
yeah.
know what you're
That's
doing
the thing.
is right.
I've always got a good heart. I will always give people the benefit of the doubt to a certain extent, but I'm wary. I'm very wary of trusting anybody nowadays, and it's letting people in again. Sometimes I can appear quite cold when I'm not really. I have feelings, I have emotions. I've had a lot to deal with over the past few years. Basically, I lost everything. And I'm picking myself up still today, financially, mentally. I was exhausted for about 3 years, totally exhausted with what it did to me. And nowadays, I'll still have the odd month or so where I'll go into a very dark place. The reason why I started the Let's Celebrate Pantomime page was because I was going through a dark phase, and I thought, well, what cheers me up? Pantomime cheers me up. So I started the page, invited all my friends to the page, then amateur companies joined, more pros joined, directors joined, producers joined, stage crew joined, front of house joined. It was phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And the camaraderie, especially at the beginning, was people were asking questions, and everyone was giving their penneth worth, answers and things like that. And it was a real sort of like friendly group and things like that. If anybody puts a negative comment on there that I think is wrong, it will get deleted. Even the person will get deleted if they continue, because I don't think that's the right page for them. It's a supportive page for everybody that loves Panto, and I just want people to enjoy it. And I post things like, Victorian Edwardian photos of the old pros from then in beautiful costumes, things like that. And it's a mixture of old and new. Everybody can advertise their pantos when they're coming out. Everybody can put on there whatever they want as long as it's to do with Panto. Even though I write scripts, we've got several script writers on there, and they're free to advertise their script writing too. I don't sort of edit those sort of things. So
does it feel then, by setting up that group, and just to say as well, thank you for setting up the group, because it does bring joy to so many.
Yeah.
But does it feel a bit like you're not performing, but now this is kind of a performance to fellow pros?
It does a little bit. I mean,
when you're finding these little gems.
Oh yeah,
pictures,
totally.
And then you share it, and then
I found out things that I just didn't know about Panto, like the old Principal Boys. You know, when they were played by females in the Victorian era, they used to actually sometimes pad their hips and things like that for a more of a shape. You know, like drag queens nowadays, you have the padding, that sort of thing. They used to do it then. I can't remember what they called them. They weren't stays or something like that, but I can't remember the word now. I'll have to Google it again. Thank God for the internet. But yeah, I didn't know that. I just thought, oh well, she's got the beautiful cut Principal Boy costume, but then the legs look slightly odd. But a lot of them actually used to pad their thighs and things like that to give it more of a manly shape. I didn't know that. Lots of things that I've found, like pictures of the old performers that are just lovely to look at. You know, and it's like with your podcast, in 100 years' time, people are going to be listening to these podcasts again. They're going to be hunting out, if the internet still exists, you know, in 100 years, there'll be some form of it, I'm sure. But you'll have people in 100 years looking back at the photos that we're putting on now. You know, there might not be Facebook and things like that in 100 years, but people will hunt out those photos, those podcasts, those newspaper cuttings, just like we're doing now. And I find that fascinating because you're bringing those performers back to life and you're finding out about the business at that time. And that's what I love about it. So it's kept the enjoyment of Panto, for me, going through the year.
Does it feel like a bit of a burden sometimes?
Doing the page?
Yeah.
I do have odd days where I think, ooh, I don't want people today. You know,
and you've got a response.
Yeah.
It's like this in a way, in the nicest possible way. And I love this. After my children, this is the proudest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's brought so much joy to people all over the world. But sometimes, like last night, driving for miles and miles.
I mean, you've driven all over the country to sort of interview people, yeah? Amazing.
I've got some other things planned in the future, which I can't tell on the podcast just yet. But listeners, watch this space.
Very good.
What have been your favourite routines to perform then in Panto?
Well, when I first started, we used to do like the old-fashioned routines, like present of a pheasant and things like that. If I go and see Pantos, I love it and I'm in hysterics if anything falls down on a rope onto someone's head from the flies and there's a big zoink from the pit. I love that. I find that very funny, visual comedy, so I like that. I know the audience love it, but I hate doing 12 Days of Christmas. I really hate it because, and I do know the audience love it, but as a performer, and especially if you're a dame and you're in a heavy frock, having to run around picking up, you know,
but that's part of
12
the fun.
Lots of thing.
They want that. They want to see you secretly smiling and going, "I'm hating this." They love that.
So whenever I get a script, if it's one that I haven't written, I get a script and it's got 12 days in, there is a part of me dies, you know.
You know what's going to happen now, don't you? Anybody listening is
the producer will ask it to be added this year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do it. Do it.
I'm busy changing costume then. Not available. Yeah. When I first started writing Panto scripts, I used to always put the old routines in. They're getting less and less now because people don't particularly want to watch them.
You said just then present for a pheasant.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Have you not?
No, what is
It's when someone comes in with a paper bag and they say, "Oh, I've got a present of a pheasant." I can't remember all the lines now, but basically the next character comes on and they think it's a present of a pheasant and it's not. And I'd have to sort of have a look at my script again because it's ages since I'm talking 15 years ago when I last used that, but it's one of the old routines.
Wordy.
Yeah, like all the old routines were, like, can you lend me 50p and all things like that. And it goes on and on for about 20 minutes, different characters coming on, and, even the band get roped in at some point, lending one of the characters a fiver and that sort of thing. But yeah, the old routines I used to love, because that's what I grew up watching. It was the norm in Panto then. It's like with special acts. Very few Pantos have special acts in now. When I went to see Goldilocks at the Palladium the other year, I absolutely adored that. I went twice, but we had the motorcyclists in that show, and like your heart was in your mouth, and that's what you used to get in every Panto when I first started. You'd have a magic act who just came on for 10 minutes, and that's all they did. Rest of the show, they were in the dressing room. You'd have, there was a great act called Emerson and Jane, which was like the flying carpet that they did in Aladdin. You'd have a proper UV act come on. Nowadays it tends to be, the young dancers dressed up in blacks and then with the UV costumes, but then you'd have a proper variety act come on, do their act for 10 minutes and then go off. You very rarely get those nowadays, obviously because of the cost factor. And that was the same with the old routines. There are very few Pantos nowadays that still have them. I think because it was part of the variety circuit act, and that was roped into pantomime, and it was the norm.
Do you think though that pantomime is sort of going back to its roots a bit?
Do you know what I think? With the past 2 years, I think it may well do. Next time, I think the heart is going to really come back with Panto, not only because both performers, stage management, and everybody connected with Panto wants that. I think the audience will want that as well. They'll want to all sit there and feel as if this big pair of arms has just enveloped them and giving them all a big hug. I think that's what people want. When I first started, as I said earlier, you'd get the comic coming on and doing 20 minutes of their act. People get bored very quickly nowadays. They're instant, like TV is instant nowadays. The internet is instant. Social media is instant. They want everything instant, bang, bang, bang. So if one character comes on and does 20 minutes, everybody switches off. Years ago, the Dame used to come on. The comic came on, did 20 minutes. The Dame came on and did 20 minutes, like what they used to call an opening spot. I tend not to write that into Pantos nowadays, because both me as a performer will switch off and the audience will switch off. And obviously my brain is not as quick as it was 20, 30 years ago. If I've got to learn, 50 lines from my opening spot, you ain't going to get it.
Have you noticed then, over these years, that audiences have changed in their attention spans?
Yes, especially the children, the school shows. The really young ones will sit there and you'll just see the row of faces just looking at you gobsmacked, because they're not quite sure at that age. And like, especially with the Dame, is it a man? Is it a woman? What is it? That's the impression that I get for the school shows. And I love the reaction that you get from the kids at the end, because they've followed the story, they've loved every bit about it, the colour, the costumes, the sets, the music, everything, they've adored it. But you do see them sat there and you're thinking, what are they thinking? I much prefer an adult audience as a Dame, because they totally get it. They get it's a man in a frock. They get the gags, the slightly risque gags, I don't particularly, maybe this is awful of me to say it, but I don't particularly enjoy doing the school shows as a performer, as a Dame, because they don't feed your soul like the adults do. And that's me being totally honest. I'll do them, I'll give the same energy, but it doesn't feed the soul.
They will always, though, go for the more childlike person that they relate to.
Yeah, they'll always go, they'll love the comic. They'll absolutely adore the comic, because the comic is silly, is a buffoon. And Dame's silly to a certain amount, but I wish nowadays that dames would get more respect for what they put into a pantomime, because I think the dame is the key to a lot of pantomime success, in the sense that they're the thread, they're the character that the audience love to watch, but they're not necessarily the name, they're not the celebrity. Obviously, a lot of the audience will have bought the ticket because of the celebrity in the show, but you could have phenomenal dames on that stage that don't get the recognition. Like a lot of the posters, you'll have the celebs above the title because they're the ones that are going to sell the tickets, and then you'll have the dame at the bottom of the poster. The dame is one of the major parts in the panto, so I really hope that the dame gets more recognition. And that's not only because that's a part that I play, it's that I think it should. I really think it should. I'm one of the old school where I wish principal boys would come back. Female principal boys. I know we've moved on. But that's what I started with. There were some terrific principal boys that I worked with, and it's gone. If someone had said 20 years ago, oh, we're going to get rid of principal boys, everybody would have said, that's never going to happen. Well, it happened. You know, we're now starting to get men play wicked queens. I do think Panto has got very male heavy from removing the female principal boy. Now, as I said, the men are playing wicked queens when the wicked queen is a gift of a part for an actress. And I still don't know whether I should use the word actress, because lots of performers nowadays, male and female, they're called actors. I'm of the old school where I think the name actress it conjures up for me lovely history. Why should you be ashamed of the word actress? I just don't know. I think everybody wants a label now, where I'm from an age group that fought for many years not to be labelled. So I know I've got to educate myself on that, and I've got to learn what is right and what is wrong about what I should call people. He, she, they, him, you know, all things like that. You know, I do appreciate that I haven't got to offend anybody. But what is wrong with being called an actor or an actress? I've still not worked that out. Maybe someone will tell me.
Knowing social media, they probably will.
Yeah. That'll be another day where I don't want people. Yeah.
Song sheets.
Yes.
Do you like that part? When you do them?
I tend to get out of song sheets now because of getting into my finale frock. Song sheets have got a lot shorter than what they used to be.
Haven't they?
Yeah.
You could have a lot of business with them.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the time now, they don't even get the children onto the stage, whereas years ago, the comic would get like 5 children up onto the stage, talk to them but it just goes on. And the audience are sat there, oh, this is going on and on and on, because we know they've got to change the set for the finale. Technically, you know, changing the set for the finale has got quicker now, so there's no need to have a long song sheet. I tend to get out of them as much as possible now, because I'm not a comic. You know, yes, I'm a comic actor, but I'm not a comic. I couldn't hold the stage for 20 minutes chatting to people.
Did you find it tricky then when you did have to do song sheets?
Yeah. Sometimes when I started, there'd just be me as the dame on. I found that really difficult. When it's the dame and the comic with the children, obviously you can bat off each other, and then you say, oh, bye boys and girls, I've got to get ready for the wedding, and you'll go off and get changed, where the poor comic has got to get into his finale costume in like 30 seconds, you know. So I get out of them as much as I possibly can nowadays. If I'm writing the panto that I'm in, I'll never put the dame into the song sheet.
The writing process then,
Yeah.
how do you kind of structure the pantomime itself, and how do you relate as well to modern audiences when you're writing panto?
I try to keep all my panto scripts pacey. I do like pace. I don't like people coming on and having 12 lines of dialogue before the next person speaks. I think it's got to be snappy now. I stick to the story. I think the fairy tales that we grew up with, that we know, it has to be the story that is there as the main thing. So when I first started writing pantos, I used to read all the old fairy stories again. Now with the internet, you can watch old fairy tale movies and things like that. I take snippets from here and there and then structure the panto as I know panto should be. Like I'm really of the old school now, where the ghost gag should be the second scene in Act 2, like it always used to be. Nowadays, you've got some pantos where the ghost gag is in like Act 1, third scene, So I still always put the ghost gag Act 2, scene 2.
Love a ghost gag.
Yeah.
Are there any pantomimes that you would like to write?
Yes, I started to write Mother Goose. I've done Mother Goose twice as a performer, but not as the dame. I wanted to write Mother Goose and I started, but then, the pandemic came about and I really lost all my creativity. I couldn't face going onto the laptop and sitting there for another 6-7 hours trying to write when no inspiration was coming. I felt that really difficult. Mother Goose I'd like to write. Goody Two Shoes I also started on, which is an old panto from, I think the last time a professional one of that was done was probably in the 50s. So that hasn't been done for a long time. As a producer, if you get the title Goody Two Shoes, you immediately think, well, how am I going to sell that? Nobody knows the story anymore. But a lot of the amateur groups are still doing Goody Two Shoes. That's one I'd like to write for the amateurs. I don't think it will ever get produced again professionally. Certainly not in my lifetime, I wouldn't have thought. Not many people know the story anymore.
What is the story?
It's basically about a little girl who finds two shoes in the woods. A bit sort of like in the Mother Goose story, where Demon Vanity says, if you give me the goose, I'll give you beauty. That sort of thing. This fairy, it's sprite, imp, whatever you want to call it, in the woods, leaves these shoes and she has to be good. And she gets the shoes for being good. But then it all goes wrong, it all unravels and things like that. And she turns slightly... She has an edge, shall we say.
Sounds really fun.
A lot of...
But commercially,
how do
not
you sell
a Cinderella.
it? No.
It's not a Disney title.
Exactly. It's the same with Dick Whittington. I love Dick Whittington as a panto. It's not done that often. If you look around the whole country and you've got 240 pro pantos, Dick Whittington will probably be about 20 of those, 30 of those. But it's a great story. And it's based on reality. All the others are fairy stories. Dick Whittington, in theory, in inverted commas, happened.
What was it like playing ugly? Did you do the ticket tearing?
Yeah, I love the ticket tearing scene. I love writing it. I love being in it. I love doing it. Because that's the main scene where you can be really nasty to Cinderella. The difficult thing with Ugly Sisters is, yes, you've got to be evil, but you've also got to be funny. Because that's what the audience want. They want to laugh at the Ugly Sisters as well as hate them. Not a real hate, because they also love those characters. But that's the one scene where you can be really, really nasty. I remember once, I can't remember where it was. It was in the trying on of the slipper scene. And literally just before I went on, my zip went on my costume. So for the whole of the trying on of the slipper scene, I was sat on this chair with somebody holding my costume together at the back while I was trying to get this slipper on. Nothing else you can do when things like that go wrong. It's the same when you're getting change, when you're doing costume changes. If a zip goes, it's the difference between getting on stage and not.
Have you ever missed the cue?
I think I was late for one because I was doing I think both of us were actually, when we were doing Ugly Sisters. It was the first time we'd done the change properly, because some text directors like you to wear costumes, some want you just to get through the technical side so you can do it in your civvies. But I think it was the first time we'd done the change and we didn't make it. And then of course you've got the cast on stage waffling because they don't know where we are, when we're going to come on. And this was on an opening day. It was on the first show.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. So we got them to add a bit more dialogue.
Do you like it, though, when things go wrong, deep down?
I'm a great corpser. I find it really easy to corpse on stage. Just someone can look at me slightly differently and I will go. Yeah, I enjoy that. Although when I'm in an audience watching a panto, I don't like to see it. I don't like seeing what they call cod corpses, where they pretend to laugh. You know, where they laugh, but to make the audience think that they are really laughing when it's actually scripted in. Because I'm there, and as a pro, I know that's what they're doing. So I don't enjoy doing that, and I don't think I'm clever enough to actually do that on stage. Whereas if I naturally laugh, I find that funny.
I was always told, look at the orchestra. If they're laughing, it's genuine.
Yeah.
Because it's never happened. They've had to sit through every single performance hearing the same gags.
Yeah.
And if they're laughing.
Yeah, talking of the band, when I did Panto in Mansfield, we had Ruth Maddock, Peter Simon and Nicholas Parsons in the show. Well, there's me, Peter and Nicholas and the other ugly sister doing the ghost gag. Were sat on the bench and the whole band had got these blow-up Nicholas Parsons heads, masks on. And they were all in this pit. Well, I had a video, it's now disintegrated, but I had a video of the show and they'd filmed it on the day that this happened. And there's me literally with tears rolling down my face. I thought my costume was going to burst, you know, and Peter Simon as well was on the floor. And just like suddenly to see this row of Nicholas Parsons in the pit was just hysterical. You had to be there. Probably doesn't sound funny now, but at the time it was. I'm not a great lover of sort of last day pranks, especially if I've directed the show as well. I don't mind people enjoying themselves, but anything that's done that really affects the integrity of the show, I don't like. I remember the first season that I did, somebody had put like super glue onto the chair and someone sat on the chair and they just couldn't get up. They couldn't get up off the chair.
Goodness.
Yeah. So they had to rip the costume off them. Somebody had sewn my the bottom of the tights. They'd somehow sewn across it, so I couldn't get my tights on for a quick change. If it buggers up the show, I don't like that. I'm all for people having fun, but there's limits. Some people just go too far. They really do. But I enjoy the camaraderie of Panto and I love having a laugh, but not at the expense of the audience.
What would be your advice then for either upcoming dames or producers, directors, writers?
I would say go and see as many Pantos as you possibly can. Watch these people. Even getting internships in production offices, to see how it's done. A couple of years when I wasn't performing, when I went through that phase of that I couldn't face performing, I went and worked as a production assistant in the West End and worked on quite a lot of the productions that were going on in town. And I learnt that side of it. I learnt the production side. I had to deal with the people that designed and printed programs. Things like that. Try and learn as much from every single department that you can. If you're a performer, go and watch all the pantos that you can. Just go in and absorb whatever you can. Learn from it, because you'll be able to learn something, and you'll see how they deal with stuff. Like, comics, because of their nature, they're very good at coming back if something goes wrong in a show. Straight away they'll come out with something and they'll have the audience in the palm of their hand, because that's it's inbuilt into them. And that's what I find difficult as a dame. If something goes wrong, yes, I'll laugh and I'll immediately come up with something, but it won't necessarily be as funny as what a comic could come up with. I'm not that clever. I'm not a comic. I never claimed to be. And it's such a difficult job. I can see that. So I would never want to do that. I'm happy doing dame. I'm happy doing ugly. I'm happy directing. who knows, maybe when I feel on top of everything, I may want to produce again. There's part of me that does. I produce the amateur shows still, and I get great enjoyment from doing that. That really feeds my soul. So I think maybe in 10 years' time, if I'm still around, I might put my foot back in the water and produce again. But I'd make sure that I got everything right this time. I'd really make sure that, you know, I dotted the I's and crossed the T's and had a team around me that I know I could trust.
Well, this leads me on to my last question. Your dream pantomime. I don't know if you've heard of this question before at all.
I haven't, no.
No, it's all. So you can choose the venue,
Yeah.
the production. You can be in it.
Yeah.
You can be in the stalls watching it, and you can choose the cast. And they could be either alive or dead, or a mixture of both.
One of my favourite venues that I've done Panto in and also toured to with a few musicals is the Belfast Grand Opera House. I adore that theatre, and now it's just been renovated again, so apparently it's stunning. I do love that theatre, but I love the city as well. I really fell in love with the city. So I think that would be the venue. Mother Goose, I think, because I've never done that Panto as a dame, so I'd like to do that one. Cast-wise, do you want me to cast it as well?
Please.
Well, I've always wanted to work with Sue Pollard. Always wanted to work with her. So maybe she could be either Comedy Fairy or female Dame Vanity. That might be quite nice. Comic, I love Billy Pearce. I do like Billy Pearce. And I'd have to throw in Bette Midler as something. I'd write a part in for her. Because I've always wanted to work with her as well.
There'd be lots of offstage
Yeah,
antics.
she'd never come over. But
There'd be lots of offstage antics, though, wouldn't there?
yeah.
Afterwards?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, then again, I'm talking about the old pros. You know, I've got such an affinity with the old pros because I learnt so much from them, and I can still learn from anybody that I work with nowadays. Never stop learning, because you will always learn something from somebody you work with, and you've got to be open to learn stuff. I see a lot of the younger people and I don't think I was ever the same when I was young, because I was so green. Nowadays, lots of people are so knowing that they're not green anymore. But a lot of the younger ones, they come into the business thinking that they know it all. My advice would be, yes, you're very talented and you probably do know a lot, but you don't know it all. Listen to the old pros, watch the old pros, learn. You know, I can learn things from younger people. You know, I can learn things from older people, but you have to be open to that. Don't think you know it all, because you just won't get employed. You really won't.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for taking part in the Panto podcast.
Thank you.